Mel. Thank you so much for joining me today. I think we have a very interesting discussion today, great topic that we need to look into. You brought something very interesting to my attention this week, which was the fact that Russia is now going to be put under investigation by the International Criminal Court. And, we know that there's the conflict that is happening in Russia and Ukraine currently, but that is not what this discussion is actually about. What the discussion is actually about is the fact that ICC is now going to be investigating Russia. So yes, Russia is a subject that will be touched on briefly, but that's not the focal point of what we would like to discuss today, what you and I will be bringing to the forefront. You obviously have your certain points that you would like to share with us, and I've done my extensive research as well, and I have certain things that I would like to bring to the forefront. And then based on the conversation that we will be having, we'll try and highlight certain concerns that we have with regards to the role that the ICC is playing in this whole global game of chess, if I could call it that, because that's pretty much what it is. So thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, it's always great to be with Natasha, and lovely that we can have these discussions and unpack this information together. It's wonderful to have someone who's actually doing the research and looking deeper and understanding that there's more than one side to this crazy narrative that they're pushing out on us.
No, absolutely. So first and foremost, there are a few articles that's going around. I will post the link in the comment section after the recording and so on, where, most of the mainstream media, they are reporting on the fact that the newly appointed, and it's very important that I actually state that the newly appointed prosecutor of the ICC, Karim Khan, he has now verbally mentioned that Russia will be going under investigation. And just to let you know, he was elected on the 12th of February of 2021, and he was sworn in June of 2021. Now, I'm not sure if you know much about Mr. Karim Khan, but I had a look into a little bit of his history because, again, you know me, I love my history. I went to go and have a look a little bit into this prominent gentleman. And there's been a lot of mixed reviews with regards to him. So the jury's still very much out on Karim Khan. He was Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations. So boing, there goes my first flag. And then also he served as the first special advisor and the head of the United Nations investigative team to promote accountability for crimes committed by ISIL in Iraq between 2018 to 2021. So that was the last large project that he was working on. So he was actively involved with what was happening in Iraq. Now, just quickly to touch on to that, ICC has not lodged any investigations with regards to crime wars, crimes against humanity, war crimes, or anything like that with regards to what has happened in Iraq. We know that United States, they are not a signatory on the ICC. So in actuality, should they be investigating it? You would think on paper, no. However, the United Nations Security Council should be coming together as a whole, and they should be going, hang on a second, over 1 million people have died. So that should be something that should come to light, and it hasn't. And Mr. Karim Khan is very much aware of what has been happening in Iraq, considering he's been working on it for so many years. Yet, nothing has happened to that. So another red flag for me, if I had to look at that. Then, Karim is also a barrister. Now, a barrister, for those that don't know, I didn't know this. I went to go and have a look, and a barrister is actually a lawyer who is entitled to practice as an advocate. So that's a very powerful position to have if you think about it, because usually you'll have a lawyer present and you'll have an advocate present. Now, a lawyer can only work up until a certain point, and then an advocate will come in and he will then take over from that point and he will then move on further. So they have different roles that they play. Now, if you are able to cover both of those roles, it could have a great result at the end of the day, but you could also have certain, certain points that you are not covering correctly. You could be covering up certain points. You could not be looking at everything objectively. You could be skipping certain points. That's just my personal opinion. I would rather have two sets of eyes overlooking a certain situation than having one set of eyes overlooking a certain situation, especially when it comes to matters of such critical context. So that's the other thing that came, another little red flag that popped up there. And then he's also on the Queen's Council. Now, in order to be on the Queen's Council, you are put there by being appointed by the monarch. Now, we all know, I used to love the Queen. I used to be such a little follower of the Queen and all her little subjects. I'm not that anymore. Not after I actually, woke up and came across all the little dirty little laundry chutes that filters through the castle. So the fact that he's been appointed by the monarch and that he's on the Queen's Council, that's another little red flag for me. So he does have 25 years of professional experience as a prosecutor, victims counsel, and defense lawyer in domestic and international criminal tribunals. But we all know that everyone has choices to make in life. We all know that you are still only a human being. And where your loyalty lies says a lot about what type of choices you are going to make. He's been exposed to a lot of different situations internationally. He's had conversations with many different people, the good guys and the bad guys. So he's now investigating a country who has been tarnished and painted as the bad guy. Mainstream media has made them out to be this rogue, rebellious terrorist, so to speak, when in actual fact there's so much more information that is attached to what is actually happening. A military operation, when it's been labeled as an invasion, a genocidal war crime, but is it really what it is? So that is Mr. Karim Khan, who is now putting all these articles and all these discussions out into mainstream media and into the international narrative, so to speak. So thank you for that article that you sent to me. That's where my investigation started. Your thoughts on Mr. Karim Khan and the article?
Thank you, Natasha. When you look at anything to do with the ICC, you got to, first off, from my own personal perspective, I've had a lot of, and we will get into this, a lot of experience dealing with them as a supposed organ, a legitimate legal organ, supposedly in service of the people. Now, my experience has been that they are not necessarily legitimately performing the function that they were put out to do, and it's certainly not being done with enough investigation into who and what should be charged. That's what I found. And in fact, I definitely believe that there's agendas and people will be put forward and people will be withheld from prosecution by the ICC, and those decisions are made at a much higher level. I personally have first-hand experience of this, and I'm a first-hand witness in terms of my account, which can verify these happenings. So when you asked me about Karim Khan and what I think of him, I think anybody at the head of an organ like the ICC either has to do some huge radical reform, otherwise they're still just playing to the agenda, and quite simply they've probably been put there because they're a puppet of a much higher power. That's my belief.
I have to, and I'm not going to say unfortunately, I'm just going to keep it quite brief. I have to agree with you there. The mixed reviews that I received, there's been a lot of people that have been saying, hopefully he's going to make huge changes to the ICC. Now, why would that be said to start off with? Because why would the ICC need huge changes? Now, if you look at the investigations that the ICC have embarked on, I actually made a list. The ICC have done, they've only had investigations in specific countries across the world. Onder andere, it's been the Democratic Republic of Congo, Uganda, Central African Republic, 2 investigations there. Darfur, which is in Sudan, Kenya, Libya, Ivory Coast, Mali, and then there's 4 that it's just started. They haven't even really lodged those investigations, but they're starting off with it, which is Georgia, Burundi, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh. Now, if you look at those countries that they are doing the investigations on, my question is, there's been so many other wars across the country, across the world, where there's been loads of genocide. There's been thousands and thousands, and in one instance, one number that has really stood out for me was just over 1 million. I think it was 1,033,000 people that have died, confirmed, and that was specifically in Iraq. There's no investigation. There's absolutely no investigation. Why is it predominantly African countries? Why is it predominantly countries where the heads of state have been literally removed? If you look at situations, if you look at the situation in Sudan, it was predominantly a situation between rebels and the government, where the head of the state tried to negotiate, to have peace conversations. He tried to sort things out nationally. And if you have a look at the treaty, that is what is meant to happen at first. ICC can only investigate where the state is unable and or unwilling to do so. So they have to give the country the first chance, the first choice to first sort out internally. And once they cannot sort it out internally, once they've given them enough time to sort it out internally, only then can they either move in, if it is an ICC signatory state, or if the United Nations Security Council then advises, can the ICC then step in? Yet, if you look at Sudan, if you look at Libya, if you look at Kenya, again, these are all African countries. They've moved in every time. They've moved in to remove the heads of state. If you have a look, for example, at Libya, NATO, which falls under the Security Council, NATO moved in. And if you have a look at the write-ups, if you have a look at, I'm talking about independent media, I'm not talking about mainstream media. If you have a look at how NATO, how they've managed their military operations, the way they manage the controlling the situation, if I can call it that, it's always turned out where the rebels either secured the head of state, or there was how can I put it? There were more people that died, or there was an influx of genocide, and NATO didn't stop it. NATO didn't prevent it. And United States happens to be involved every step of the way. Washington Post, New York Times, if you have a look at the track record as well, every single time before all this, before the mangoes hit the fan, they go into the countries, they do their reporting, they send out the mainstream media filth, reporting on racism, not in actual fact, they're not reporting on the rebels fighting the government, they're reporting on racism crimes, they're reporting on the information that they're sending out into the mainstream media is completely different to what is in actuality happening in the country. So then when NATO moves in, when the so-called Security Council sends in their forces and they control the situation with overthrowing the government, with replacing the head of state, by that time, the United States walks out smiling, big smile on their face. They're not even a signatory on the ICC. The ICC they've literally gone and accommodated Western countries in actuality. And who's the ones that are reaping the, I'm not going to say benefit, the complete opposite of benefit. What would that word be? The ones that are in actuality losing out. It's the people on the ground, yet again. ICC, they are clearly being used as pawns, as puppets France, United Kingdom, and the UK, they've done this before. They've worked together before by moving into a country where they've used the ICC as a loudspeaker to go and remove a head of state, to go and label them as parties in inducing war crimes for the benefit of these other countries. Yes, UK and France, they are signatories, but the United States, they are not. So is the ICC really trying to do the right thing? Are they really trying to protect the people of the world? I have questions.
Yes, good point, Natasha. Absolutely. That's the question, the theme of this conversation, ICC, friend or foe. And when you've got one of the biggest war crimes committing countries or states in the world, being the USA, who are not even accountable to the ICC because they're not a signatory. Mind you, neither is Israel. Also, let's not go there because I don't want to upset anybody because it's a tender topic. But let's face it, neither is Israel. And you got to wonder how effective can they be as an organ when the two biggest war crimes countries in the world, and let's face it, America gives 1/5 of its foreign spending budget to Israel. That's huge, considering how tiny Israel compared to everywhere else in the world. 1/5 of their foreign military spending budget goes to Israel. Okay, so the two biggest war crimes countries in the world can't be brought before the International Criminal Court because they're not signatories to the Rome Statute. I think that's a good place to start in terms of let's look at whether or not this organ is effective in any way. And, all of a sudden it's now being used to parlay this agenda against Russia. And we really need to understand, look, it's an organ that's not working in favor of the people. It's very much just almost a very elaborate public relations platform with which to push agendas. And I give you an idea to simplify how I've worked out this works. I know a lot of people in the truth movement who will launch projects. And what they will do is they will pull in a lot of other people from the truth movement to give their project validity, in a way siphoning off their social equity to build a project. Now, that's just a hypothetical example. In the same way, this is something we can relate to. In the same way, this is what these agendas do. They have an agenda, they've got a project, they've got an aim and ambition, they want to push it. So they get everybody to understand this is the aim and ambition, you've got to do all these things to follow along, sanctions, whatever else. Oh, and by the way, it's also we're going to get all the official organs involved, whether it be NATO, whether it be the ICC. You just throw everything you can at it to push the agenda as hard as you can. But what this has shown me is just how easy and how quick it is to move these organs along in a supposed justice of direction, a direction of justice, I should say. They're claiming that this is a just move, and they're using all the right investigative organs such as the ICC to verify and justify and investigate. But how sort of objective are these organs, and how uncorrupt are they, and are they really working in a completely transparent manner, investigating it without an actual aim in sight already? Like they probably already know what the outcome should be, so now they're going to find all the evidence and interpret it in a way that it comes in favor of their outcome, their desired outcome. So I have to again go, let's look at how we can see the different examples of things that are going on or have happened, to understand really what the ICC is and how it works. And I think the best is to kind of look at it, how it compares to the South African situation. Do you want to get into that?
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to ask you, yes, if you can, because that's where your experience actually comes in. I think that is very important because of the amount of people with regards to the South African situation that we are going to get into in comparison to the amount of people in the Ukraine currently. Because with regards to that as well, I had a look and there are so many different amounts on different platforms. CNN is reporting 800 people. Al Jazeera is reporting, I think you mentioned 146 people. So there's so many different reports of different amounts of people that have died, civilians that have died in the Ukraine. And still, again, please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying lives lost are not important, because it is. And we do not condone any form of military operations, people dying, or anything like that as being okay. That's not what this is about. But looking at the larger picture, we need to take into context what is in actuality happening here. So if you can take us through that process of your personal experience and what you went through, that would be absolutely great.
Okay, so some people may know, back in 2013, I released a documentary film called The Last of the Boers. The research of it was very enlightening, and it brought together huge amounts of evidence sourced from many different places that to me was enough to put before a criminal court and get whoever investigates it to understand the gravity of the situation. And yes, we are in fact facing a Boer genocide, farm murder genocide. Farm, for those who don't speak Afrikaans or Dutch, Boer is simply the Dutch term for farmer, and it refers to a group of people who have been living in South Africa for a long period of time, over 300 years, that have descended from what we know as the Huguenots, and the Dutch people who resettled, the French people who resettled into the country, and they became known as the Boers. And they eventually pulled away from the totalitarian control that was going on in the Cape under Cecil John Rhodes and engaged on what was called the Great Trek, and established their own free independent Boer nations. They named one the Orange Free State. They've got cities known as Vryheid, which means freedom, because all they wanted was freedom. And that is where I think myself and perhaps you, Natasha, come from, is the spirit of freedom is innate within the Boer people. I myself am a descendant of the Boers. I've made a documentary film called The Last of the Boers, and this kind of got me involved with a number of people who wanted to bring this before the International Criminal Courts, and I was then relocated. I was living in Holland at the time, but not in The Hague. I relocated to The Hague, where we could begin this process of actually looking at how we can bring a case to the International Criminal Court for the genocide of the Boers, which by all intents and purposes had been going on for over a century, starting with the 60 or so thousand women and children that starved to death in the concentration camps in the Anglo-Boer War, and the deliberate methods of genocide that went on there against the Boers, where the British people went around burning down their homes, salting the fields so that they couldn't regrow their crops, and killing all the livestock, doing absolutely everything they could to stop the Boers from, the Boer soldiers from refreshing and replenishing from their homesteads. And you won't believe how many homes are burned down, how many farms are burned, how many animals are slaughtered. These are acts of war and genocide, and in history it's taught as the Second Boer War. So we've got clear evidence of genocide having happened there, and that has never been dealt with. The scars of that genocide still sit very deeply entrenched within the fabric of South African society. And I know that because I am of Boer descent, grew up with an Afrikaner surname. My whole family speaks Afrikaans, but I was raised speaking English because my second father was American. And I then moved to Durban when I was 10 years old, which is a predominantly English place. And it was there that I recognized when I arrived there that there's still this disparity between the English and the Afrikaners, okay? Because Durban being very, very English. Out of 30 high schools, one of them was Afrikaans. And we used to rag on the Afrikaans who were high school. Anyone who went there was seen as a bit of a yarpie, uncool kind of thing. And I had a cousin who went there, so it was, but sad. But you do get a feel for this disparity that's still deeply rooted within our culture to a certain extent. Now, the many of us who've transcended this hereditary prejudice, and we no longer behave in sort of manners of prejudice against anybody who's different, thankfully. The Rainbow Nation evolved us out of that mindset. But at the same time, what you've got is a culture of people who have been deeply hurt by what's happened, and nothing's ever been done to justify it. All that's happened is they've been blamed as the people who are responsible for everything, whilst we've also suffered, and we've never had any retribution or any tribunals or any justice for anything. And this is still going on in the form of the farm murders. How many years later, and how and tens of thousands of people murdered now. So we put this application into the International Criminal Court no less than 3 times. The first application, which, I mean, I'll do a little share screen here and I'll show you the date, because I actually, when you give it an application, they will give you a receipt to say, yes, we have got your stuff and we will get back to you. So it's proof. This is my receipt. This is the Hague, January 15th, 2014. Now, bear in mind, my film, The Last of the Boers, was released in 2013. I think it was around Easter time 2013. We got together, we got working, and we put the first application in on the 15th of January 2014. Thereafter, there were 3 more applications, and the receipts of those are still sitting with the lawyers. I happen to hold on to the very first one. Okay, so this is the first one, and it tells you here, the International Criminal Court acknowledges receipt of your documents and letter. Okay, this communication has been duly entered into the communications register of the office. We will give consideration to this communication as appropriate in accordance with the provisions of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. As soon as a decision is reached, we will inform you in writing and provide you with reasons for this decision. Right, very clear that it has been taken into consideration and they will respond to us. Okay. So I think, let me stop sharing the screen here, stop sharing, and I'll just show you if anybody wants to reference this letter for themselves, because I always think it's important for people to know where they can get this stuff from. Feel free to go to my website, melv.life/books, or just go to my website, melv.life, okay? And you can click through until you get to the books page and just click on the books. And here it says, who is Mel V? And you can read through it here, find out more, and it brings up this page over here, which gives you all of my background, talks about the fact that I'm of Huguenot and Boer origin, so you understand the motivation behind this. It's got the reference to my book, The South African Guide to the Global Conspiracy. Over here, it's got a reference to my film, The Last of the Boers. And over here, you'll find the receipt of proof of papers filed at the ICC. So please, guys, feel free to have a look at this particular page and reference this for yourself so you can see this is a legitimate document, that my background, my interest in this, for those of you who don't know, and why I've been doing this, and you know, and why perhaps I think I have legitimate credibility in saying the things I'm about to say, which is hard to hear, because many people have gone, look, what's happened in South Africa is enough to bring before the ICC. Let's go. People after me have gotten on the bandwagon trying to raise funds. Let's bring this before the ICC. And we've had to go to them, hey, friend, you can't do that because, you know, it's just, we've been there and these are the reasons why it won't work. So shall I get into the next sort of journey of what happened to that application?
Well, just very quickly, very quickly. If you have a look at that letter that you said, they said that they are going to look into the advisory of the Roman statute. Now, I just want to let the people know, the Roman statute, okay, it was founded July 1st, 2002, established the ICC court, falls under 123 countries fall into the Roman statute. We are obviously one of them. And then the 4 crimes that fall under it is genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and crimes of aggression. Now, the war crimes, there's a whole list of them, but I want to, the ones that I've specifically highlighted, and there's a reason why I want to bring these up, is because these specifically point towards farm murders, willful killing, torture, inhumane treatment, willfully compelling great suffering, destruction, and appropriation of property. There's a whole bunch of others, but these are specific ones that I wanted to highlight. Then the crimes against humanity, murder, extermination, torture, rape, sexual violence, persecution, and strangely enough, apartheid is also listed there. Which, if you guys have a look at one of the other episodes on Truth Be Told, we had an extensive discussion on exactly what apartheid is. So that to me is another red flag with regards to the ICC, because are they truly understanding what apartheid really is? You understand where I'm going with that? So yes, please continue for me.
Okay, very valid point. Yeah, thank you for that, Natasha. So by all means, by what you said, we had a valid stance to bring a case before the ICC, and we did 1, 2, 3 applications. By the time the third application went out, okay, because by this stage, the first application went and there was nothing. We didn't get an answer from them for months. So I got lawyers involved at my own expense, and local politicians got involved, rallying on behalf of the Boer cause. And they got so much international pressure because myself and my colleague Karim also went around, did a massive public relations campaign, spoke to every journalist who would listen to us, international independent media journalists. And at the same time, there were a number of little groups on the ground which were getting off the ground, some of them more legitimate than others. USAF, the United South African Federation, was getting off the ground, Saidlanders, all these various little fringe groups are getting off the ground, and there really was momentum. And some of these people were going overseas and talking to church groups. So everyone was doing their little bit to kind of raise awareness, and the pressure internationally to get this investigated became unbearable for the ICC. They could no longer ignore it. So 2 weeks after the third application was lodged, okay, I get a phone call from one of the lawyers who had been helping us along, and he basically said that unfortunately we can't proceed anymore with what the application for the investigation of genocide against the Boers in South Africa, because South Africa has withdrawn from the ICC treaty. Hang on a second. First off, a treaty actually is, I got to learn, if you enter into a treaty, you enter in by consent. The thing is, duress is considered surrender. I don't know if you know that. So if you enter into a treaty, it's got to be by consent. You can't be forced into a treaty. Okay? Which means that technically, if you by consent, you can also withdraw consent. Okay? So that's what they did. They withdrew their participation in the ICC treaty, the Statute of Rome. And the whole campaign, which had been going on then at that stage for a good few years, fell flat. We couldn't do anything more because the ICC said simply to the lawyer that contacted me, we can't continue if we have no jurisdiction over South Africa. We have no jurisdiction if they're not a signatory to the treaty because they have withdrawn. So, okay, so how does it work? If you are suddenly put in a position as a country, imagine as a country, you are suddenly put in a position where you're being investigated for war crimes, or you just pull out of the treaty and the organization that can investigate you? Like, what does that say about the whole process? How much legitimacy does that give this organ of justice? It blew me away. It broke me, because then I realized, I'd always kind of understand that everything is controlled, but I realized that everything is controlled. Every organ that is well funded and well placed is corrupt. Okay, all these judicial organs. Just a little side note on that. Over that time, I was living in The Hague, and I got to know a lot of people through the work that I was doing. And someone once said to me, we were doing a little bit of walk past the Peace Palace. They said, this place locally is known as the Palais de la Misdada. And there were two kids standing in front of us, and they turned around and looked at us and laughed, and they nodded to each other. Because locally it's known as the Palace of Crime. The Peace Palace, first off, it's a creepy ass looking palace if you actually go there. You see the symbolism on it and you go, first off, that doesn't give off the air of peace to look at it. But, okay, so it's the Peace Palace, but the rumors abound. I have no proof at all that actually the wars are planned in the basement of that palace. So black is white. What they say on the top is actually something else at the bottom, And the fact that they call The Hague the city of peace and justice when it's anything but, it's not just, it's very totalitarian. The Holland has become very, very controlled over the years. It used to be known for its tolerance and acceptance. When the EU took over, it became less and less tolerant. Even, they were very tolerant of foreigners. They've become very xenophobic. It's all been fed by the agendas. There's all this going on. And what we found was that through the whole process of dealing with the ICC and working with the various organs in The Hague, working with the various lawyers, even the lawyers themselves that we were dealing with were themselves shocked. And they had a big wake-up call, because they still very much bought into the fact that there must be some sort of justice here. These are lawyers that are based in The Hague because they'd specifically worked on cases like this in the past. So they had spent their whole life believing in this institution as an organ of justice. And we found out South Africa can just remove itself from the ICC treaty and not be prosecuted. Okay, so let's talk about why South Africa decided to remove themselves from the ICC treaty, and let's perhaps debate whether or not this was a legitimate reason.
Okay, so in actuality, I went to go and have a look, and yes, in 2017, they actually drew up a bill to withdraw from the ICC. However, SABC News reported in 2019, because this whole bill was very hush-hush, they didn't do much reporting on it. And in 2019, SABC News actually reported that no work since 2017 up until 2019, no work had actually been done on this bill. And at that time in 2019, the bill could actually lapse. So whether this bill has lapsed by now or not, I must be honest, I haven't been able to find anything on that. Something I need to go and look in on. But we are still a signatory on the ICC. So in actuality, we haven't been removed off the list. And then Shamila Batohi, she worked with ICC as a legal advisor. She's actually from South Africa. She actually said, well, this is her opinion. She supports the creation of the ICC, saying that they have a good humanitarian track record and that the rule of law applies to all. Then Masuta is obviously from our parliament. He responded saying it's a political decision which lies with Parliament. Now, on the 7th of March 2017, South Africa government formally revoked its intention to withdraw. However, ANC revealed on the 5th of July 2017 that its intention to withdraw stands. And that's what happened in 2017. But again, like I mentioned to you, in 2019, still nothing had happened from it. So some people reckon the reason why they wanted to withdraw from it was because South Africa in 2015 refused to execute ICC's arrest warrant for President Omar al-Bashir of Sudan. Keeping in mind, Sudan isn't on the ICC list, and ICC wanted to have President al-Bashir, sorry, I battle with his name. They wanted to have him arrested and so on and so forth. And South Africa said, no, they're not going to support ICC's decision there. And South Africa also didn't approve what was happening in Sudan, Kenya, and Libya. So they didn't support all of that. However, the point that you are making with regards to the application that you made at the ICC is very, very valid, because I think that they could seriously have come under huge fire because of what was happening in South Africa and the fact that they hadn't done anything. Because my frustration is, like I mentioned to you early on, so many X amount of people have died in the Ukraine. That's one context. X amount of people have died in Iraq. That's another context. Now you look at what's happened in other African countries. You look at how ICC has gotten involved in all the different situations. Look at USA's position with regards to all the situations. What is the United States situation with regards to Russia and the Ukraine? What is their situation with regards to Iraq? What's their situation with regards to the rest of the African countries? How are they involved with South Africa? So can you only imagine if South Africa and the government and the parties that would have to come under scrutiny for the genocide that is happening in South Africa, for the farm murders, can you only imagine what implications that would have on an international level? That would be huge implications. So is it beneficial for the powers that be? It would not be beneficial for their agenda on any level, because in actuality, this is my opinion, United States with their EU countries, the European countries, and so on and so forth. Then you've got Russia and you've got China, who's breaking away and forming their own little thing. At the end of the day, these two dominant figures are going to end up fighting over Africa, and they're going to need to see who's going to end up getting Africa. So you can't have Africa now also going into this fight with regards to past wars and the genocide that happened here. So we aren't important enough to have our history resolved. We are not a factor. to them. The same with the other African countries. At the end of the day, the other African countries, they will remove the states, the head of states where they need to benefit the Western countries the way that they need to be benefited for the progression of their agendas. They don't care about the people that are dying on the streets. They don't care about the genocide that's happening in Rwanda. They don't care about that. They're not interested in all those poor people that are dying. Because if they were, why has the ICC not done anything about Rwanda? Why have they not walked in there and done anything? They literally have trust funds. They've created trust funds, which has been established for victims to provide support to victims, survivors, their families, and communities. But again, those trust funds, it's only for certain secular groups. It's only for certain secular countries. And I can guarantee you, even though the United States, even though they're not a signatory on the ICC, they are pulling a heck of a lot of strings with regards to the ICC, because the ICC is only an organ of the United Nations. Remember, the ICC they only came into effect after the United Nations. Before the United Nations, we had the League of Nations. The League of Nations precedes the United Nations. And the League of Nations, the United Nations, just to let you guys know, was a discussion that actually came up between President Roosevelt, Stalin, and Winston Churchill. Please go and have a look a little bit at Stalin, Winston Churchill, and President Roosevelt, and go and have a look at where those lovely gentlemen stem from and which organizations they were a part of. So if you for one second think the United Nations is this fantastic organization who's going to come and save the world, you are in for such a rude surprise. There are obviously people that are a part of the organizations who would love to help people and who would love to assist people. And yes, they do good work in certain instances. But you have those in the wings that are using all these other titles, and they're using the funds, and they're using the power behind their names and their diplomatic passports, and they're making their agenda become a reality every single day, more and more and more. And the ICC is just another organ.
Absolutely. Can I just do a share screen here, because I want to bring something up just to deal with the issue of, was the withdrawal legitimate or not? Because South Africa now decides to just withdraw 2 weeks after the third application, huge amounts of international pressure to have South Africa prosecuted for the genocide that's happened in the past and is still going on. So just to share the screen here of state parties who are party to the Statute of Rome, okay, and the International Criminal Court. And you can go through this and read through it on the wikipedia.org website. And, not that I rate Wikipedia that highly, but, for all intents and purposes, it's what we've got to work with here. Yeah. And it shows you here, withdrawal. Clearly it shows you South Africa withdrew, okay, from the ICC treaty on 19th of October 2016, but it didn't follow up with a formal application, and the withdrawal was rescinded.
Yeah.
Now, this is just enough time to pull away so that any legal actions that are being put to the ICC against South Africa are sort of not actionable, because supposedly the ICC doesn't have jurisdiction there, or that's what they told us in the legal team. All right, but actually South Africa never had any intention of leaving the ICC. They just gave the appearance of leaving. And that's where it becomes suspicious, because they never followed through. They never actually followed through with a notification that would make their withdrawal effective. And then the withdrawal was rescinded. So technically, they are still party to the ICC now, which means technically they can be brought before the ICC. But here's the thing, is that you go to, and it took a huge amount of resources and finances just to get the first, and effort in terms of public pressure, just to get the first 3 applications to a place where it was getting huge international attention and they couldn't ignore it anymore. And thus they withdrew 2 weeks later under the auspices that they were unhappy with things that were being done in Africa. Well, they obviously weren't that unhappy with it, because they never made their withdrawal effective. Clearly. It was just an excuse to not be prosecuted. Somewhere, someone high up in the intelligence services was pulling strings going, okay, we cannot avoid the pie in our face as the ICC to not investigate South Africa. There has to be something done here so that we can step around this, because South Africa, don't ever forget, people, is an absolute crucial linchpin in the sort of New World Order figure. The monies that started many of these secret societies came through Cecil John Rhodes and the round tables that he set up. So that's where huge amounts of funding through the Rhodes Foundations to all of these secret societies that control the world today. Don't underestimate how much of a role South Africa has played in that. So we are still very, very big in that, of course, which is why it's so important to keep South Africa locked up under the control of the New World Order globalists. I'll stop the sharing now. But the question here is, of course, Natasha, that we need to consider.
No, it makes perfect sense, Mel.
You know, what was their withdrawal legitimate? Why did they withdraw? And they obviously didn't care too much about their reasons for withdrawal if it wasn't made permanent. So what is really going on in terms of, back to the question, ICC, friend or foe? They didn't help us. They didn't help the Boers. They sidestepped everything as legally and officially and neatly as they could to get out of prosecuting the government in South Africa for the genocide of our people, okay, who are still being displaced to this day, running from South Africa, okay, being murdered. Farm murders almost every weekend. I see new figures coming out. So this is still going on. How legitimate is the ICC? Is it a friend? Is it a foe? And now suddenly, like not even a week, and these guys are involved in Russia. So they couldn't, over all these years that we were pushing and pushing and pushing for an investigation in South Africa, couldn't step forward, couldn't say nothing, couldn't make a public statement, couldn't acknowledge it, nothing, despite the huge international pressure that went on them. Massive. But somehow, suddenly now, they're up with the agenda. They're on America's side, even though they're not, America's not a signatory to the ICC. And there they are. They're in doing their thing, making the invasion of the inevitable invasion of Russia by the West, okay, legitimized. Because, oh, look, we've used all the right organs. We've investigated through the ICC. ICC isn't worth the building it stands in. And
I agree. No, I completely agree. Sorry, but I completely agree. They actually, one of the investigations that they did, one of the judges, and this was the ICC investigation in Kenya, one of the judges actually turned around and rejected the investigations into Kenya, and the judge was overthrown. I've got a fantastic report. I actually want to post it. It was written by, I'm very much under correction. It was a write-up, an analysis of the ICC and why South Africa has the stance that they have against the ICC. And this gentleman that wrote it up, he's got a fantastic write-up with regards to what happened in Sudan, what happened in Libya, you know, what happened in Kenya. And then he speaks about how ICC is completely in bed with the Western countries to promote their agenda. And he gives all the arguments for and against. So I'll definitely post that as well. I was very, very impressed with the way that this gentleman wrote the article. And even in there, you can clearly see what is going on. If you have a look at the United States, and many people don't know this, and I think it is because a lot of people don't exactly sit and read numerous articles with regards to what is happening in every single country across the world. But if you look at what is happening in Syria, if you look what is happening in Israel, if you look what's happening in Iraq and in Turkey with regards to ISIS and the oil and the stuff that's being moved in and out of the country, and so many of the other countries as well in Southern America, America has a finger in every single pie. And I'm not even over exaggerating when I say this. It is absolutely insane. I would call them busybodies, but sadly, they are causing so much war crimes, genocide, and crime aggression. And those are the three things that the Rome Statute is in actuality trying to fight for. Yet I don't see any of them calling America to trial. None of them. None of them are calling them to trial. In actuality, they are sitting at the forefront. And if you think about it, they are not sitting at the forefront. Whoever's controlling America, they are sitting at the forefront. And they are getting away with it completely. They are in control of moving heads of state across the world. They are in control of the economy, crashing it and making it rise. And however it is that they want to move shit around, that's exactly what they are doing. And people are falling for this. People are seriously falling for this. If you really had to go and look in with regards to what's been happening in Crimea, with regards to what's been happening in Georgia and Ukraine, then you'll start to get a better picture of why what's happening now is in actuality happening. It's really not as simple as black and white. It's actually not. And that's what's been happening in South Africa as well. Same thing. And we've got the same thing here with regards to our originals. In the late 1800s, our originals were paid with land to fight in wars. And they were given that land as rewards for fighting in wars, only to have that land revoked from them again. So now we have these originals wanting what was given to them in fighting for wars, in wars. They are now wanting some of that land back, and they are not even acknowledged. So these are things that are just happening over and over and over, and people are just okay with it. People are just, of course, please. No, please.
I love the originals. I have a great connection to the native people of our country. The original people being the Khoisan, or the Khoi/San people. That was their land originally. Whose was it to give it back to them as payment?
Exactly.
Like, oh, we're going to give you back something that was already yours if you put your life on the line and carry a gun and murder people. That's the ridiculousness of it.
But this is how the manipulation has always worked. This is how people have been manipulated, and people are still being manipulated like this. People are still being manipulated. All across the world, people are being manipulated exactly like this. And my personal feeling is that it's because we, the people, and I say that very often, we don't know where our strengths are. We don't understand our sovereignty. We don't understand that we do not need to bow down to any government. We do not need to bow down to any totalitarian group or organization. We are not accountable to anybody. You are accountable to your creator, and you are accountable to the choices that you make and to how you treat the person next to you. That is what you are accountable to. And when people start realizing that and start understanding that, that's the only time that things are going to start coming right. We can't bow down to the type of treatment that we are getting from any organization, whether it be the ICC, whether it be our government in power currently, and even that line, government in power. Who gave them the power to start off with? They are meant to serve us. And have they? Is the ICC serving the people? No, they are not serving the people. So yeah, it's very sad. In actuality, I had a look at the Geneva Convention. That was beautiful. I'm really hoping I'm not going to find anything tarnished there. But the Geneva Convention was actually founded by a humanitarian, Henry Durant. And Henry Durant, he created it in 1859 because he saw the treatment of soldiers in the Battle of Solferino. And that is how the Red Cross was established in 1863. And that's how the Geneva Convention started, which is 4 conventions. And they brought about these 4 basic things where you would treat 4 separate conventions on how the government would treat wounded or captured soldiers, people who have been shipwrecked, and civilians during the wartime. I think at this stage, it's the only treaty I like, and it's the only treaty that I think is not tarnished.
Or can I jump in there? No, not to burst the bubble. Mention
No,
the Red
don't.
Cross. You mentioned the Red Cross. Do you know who runs the Red Cross?
Oh, no.
The Knights of Malta. Look at the Red Cross.
Oh.
Yeah. The same people that run Switzerland using the same cross.
Why would you
Right?
do that to me, Mel?
The
Why?
Jesuits, the Catholic Church, the people who use that symbol. That's who ran the Red Cross, and it's called the Red Cross because it's an organ of the Knights of Malta. In fact, the Knights of St. John, which is an organ of the Knights of Malta, controlled by the Jesuits, are the ones who started the hospitals, the Knights Hospitalier, that's where you get the word from. They're the ones who run the St. John's Ambulance Service in the UK. It's what it's called, the St. John's Ambulance Service, because it's run by the Knights of St. John. The entire medical establishment is actually controlled by the Knights. And as is the Red Cross. The Red Cross has also got a fair share of things to answer for, by the way. You know, they are one of the biggest in terms of the distribution of toxic vaccinations across Africa. So, yes, an organ of the powers that be, indeed, in every sense.
Oh, golly gosh me. It just seems, you know, the sad thing is, you know what this all boils back down to? It boils back down to we, the people. Because that's where, I think that's where our strength is, and that's where our peace is. We're not going to find it in an organization, clearly. No. I think the intention behind the Geneva Convention, as the intention behind the ICC, and possibly the intention behind the United Nations, the intentions were possibly pure, but that's where it stops, sadly. The intentions.
Look at our constitutions. South Africa's constitution is one of the most progressive in the world. It's a good constitution.
It is.
Okay? It really is a good constitution. It was done with good intentions at a time when the spirit of our country was never higher. People were coming together and transcending cultural and hereditary prejudices and seeing each other as one nation, irrespective of color and race. It was a beautiful time to be a part of South Africa. I was so proud to have come out of that generation. The Constitution came out of that. But you know what that Constitution means, excuse my language, sweet bugger all now, because look what they've been doing with the vaccine program. That Constitution, yeah, the purity and the good intentions that it's put forward with, as are many peace treaties and conventions. Unfortunately, it always gets used or misused or ignored blatantly if it doesn't follow along with the ultimate agenda.
That's the thing. That's what it eventually boils down to. I mean, just on that, you know, if we had to touch onto that, if you look at the ICC and you look at the genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and crimes of aggression. Now, I can go and read you all the little bits and pieces below that, but if you had to look at the jab program across the world and what's in actuality happening, don't you think the ICC should be investigating that? And yet they haven't. So that to me is another red flag. That would definitely be another red flag. Yet that's something that they've just brushed under the carpet completely. But if I was on that side, I would think that why would we investigate that? Because it's furthering our agenda at the end of the day. But Rainer Fulmecht, they are doing an amazing job. The grand jury, they are doing such an amazing job. So let's hope that will carry enough water at the end of the day. But something else that I actually looked into, because you know me, I can't just look into one thing and then it stops there. I had a look into the international, where are they now? Here we go. The International Court of Justice, the ICJ. That was interesting. So they are also situated in The Hague, but they're a lot different to the International Criminal Courts. So when states contest over borders and islands, and when states feel that another has violated a treaty or international law, that's when they step in. And also when another country, when they need advice. So they are like an advisory committee. So that's where they step in. They're not a criminal court in actuality. They also seem to be quite independent. So even though they take people from different countries, those people wouldn't represent their actual country. They would be completely independent, and they kind of represent the world, so to speak. The way that they are formulated and the way that they present themselves and the way that they address certain things, they actually seem to be a better organization, if I could call it better than the ICC, but they're all organs of the same. So
I love your optimism.
I try.
I love your optimism. I love your optimism. And, you know, it's important to give people hope, but it's also important to be realistic because, you know, the one thing that's been very sad to see is all these well-meaning people who go on these missions and crusades and end up nowhere. And what happens is you end up with deflated people who drop out the movement.
Yeah.
You know, good people who have enough fire and intelligence to do something, but they've become so exhausted. I've been there, like completely exhausted from the fight, drained of every possible aspect of your life, your resources. I can't believe the things that I've had to sacrifice to try and effect some change. And in the end, it is kind of like hitting your head against a brick wall because sadly, no matter the best intentions, the best people in the world for the best efforts, you know, I've been involved in several of them. An example is the Sovereign State of Good Hope effort where we had the best professors in the world dealing with the secession of the Cape for the Khoisan people. Professor Winston P. Nagin, who had dealt with secessions in many other countries, and he was an expert as a top guy, and the guy's a Khoisan, a top lecturer of law at university in Florida. And he was the one that put together the paperwork that the UN should have recognized from him because he submitted paperwork to them before of a similar nature. And they just blatantly ignored it. Bottom line, they ignored the secession paperwork for the Sovereign State of Good Hope. So here's what I believe is that they will pay attention to what suits their agenda, the courts, they will bring to trial things that suits their agenda. And things that distinctly do not suit their agenda and in fact are part of the ultimate fallout pattern that drives the agenda, those things will be ignored. Like it's convenient and part of a long-standing agenda to genocide the Boers stroke white people in South Africa. It's a stated intention of the ruling government. There've been various people, not just in the ANC, but in the opposition parties who have made comments about, you know, kill the farmer, kill the Boer, you know, they want to ultimately have all the white people out of Africa. They've never stepped aside from these beliefs. They still hold these firmly and very strongly. But not wishing to scare people, I will just say that, unfortunately, unless you guys come together, start making plans and start connecting as a community, everybody's going to suffer because when all the farmers are gone, there's no food, right? So the people who are doing the harming, I'm presuming it's mostly military because they've got military grade equipment, you know, they'll be taken care of because the military gets fed, all right? It's the citizens on the ground who are going to starve when there's no farmers to feed them. So people need to start actually coming together and doing something about it. It's, you know, the farm murder thing has become so desensitized in people's consciousness because it's been going on for so long, but it's not okay. And it's not okay that the international community refuses to investigate it. We need to continue to push this matter. And in light of what's going on in Russia, I would say now more than ever is a time to make a noise about what was not done for us in South Africa, but what is being done because there's agendas behind it on the Russia-Ukraine front.
I wholeheartedly agree with you on most of your points. I do feel that South Africa does have a second chance, and I feel that we can come together in unity, and I do feel that certain mindsets from the past has been and can be erased.
Yes.
I know for a fact that we can come together as a rainbow nation. Sadly, I have firsthand and very much only recently come across some racial slander, which has hurt me very deeply. I've spoken to you about that. But I know for a fact that it is not in the majority of South Africans. And I know that if we come together and we unify, that we the people can make a difference, and we can stand together, and we can prevent South Africans from repeating our history. I do feel that we need to stand together and we need to make a noise. But we can only do that if we understand what is in actuality happening in Russia and in the Ukraine, and how that is relevant to South Africa and our history, but not to use the history as a old dirty rag that we can wear, but rather as something we are proud of and something we can learn from, and something that we can evolve from and move forward together as one. So yes, no, I agree with you on most of your points.
I agree. I know what you're saying. And I wouldn't be doing what I was doing if I didn't believe in the people of South Africa. Take away the color. I've got friends in every culture and I love them all. Sadly, there are also very bad people in every culture. And, there are, particularly in the Caucasian people who run the scene everything behind the scene. They are mostly Caucasian. So, there's evil in every demographic. So I'm not making it a racial demographic thing. I love the people of South Africa, which is why I do what I do, and try to bring awareness to it, and have for so many years wanted to really bring the focus in on how the global conspiracy ties in on the South African level, so people could understand, deconfuse themselves from the lies and this sort of superficial level of reality. Because what that does is makes them distracted and blaming each other for the problem instead of focusing on who the real enemy is. That's, almost right in front of them if they just open their eyes and look.
Absolutely.
And that is the important thing, is understanding that ultimately we must unite on our common ground, which is the pursuit of a free, fair, just, peaceful, non-toxic, sustainable world. And the true beauty of us all as South Africans, as a world, is most of us ultimately all want the same things. And we must unite on the common ground instead of looking at the ways in which we are different to each other. And therefore we must remain separate. That separatist identification paradigm doesn't work. It has never worked. It's been programmed into us by the powers that be to keep us fighting each other. And we actually now need to grow up, give ourselves a little pep talk, and get past this hereditary nonsense and stuff that we believe, based upon the fact that we've been educated or media indoctrinated. There's so much more going on, and everybody has a role to play. So everybody has to step up.
Absolutely. So is ICC friend or foe? Mel, I'm terribly sorry, but I'm going to have to go with foe. What's your point? What do you think?
Gee whiz, tough one, eh? There was a time when I believed that it was a way for us to go. I believed in it. I went through I moved to The Hague specifically to fight this fight for the Boers and go through the ICC and be there and do that thing at that time. And I've had to learn the hard way. It's not just through reading a few things online. I've actually had to learn the hard way. And it's sad. It's sad because I think a lot of South Africans still hold on to the hope. Here's important. They hold on to the hope that someone internationally is going to come in and save them. And I'm sorry, everybody who might listen to this, it's not going to happen. People in South Africa need to take the initiative and do it for themselves, because if you start relying on outside powers to save you, those people ultimately will end up controlling you. They'll come in and take ownership of everything, and it doesn't necessarily end up better than what it is now. A lot of people go, well, anything's better than what we got now. The ANC government are killing us, or whatever, whatever they're doing, stealing us, robbing us blind. No, the point is to bring you to your knees so that you accept whatever solution is given to you. Like Natasha said, you got to come into your power, know how wonderful you are, and understand that you deserve abundance. Okay? You deserve a better world. And you absolutely are responsible for bringing that about, each and every one of you. And each of us has a part to play in this journey.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I went with foe. For the first time in a long time, I had a very short answer, and I regret that now. But yes, no, I completely, wholeheartedly agree with you. I used to, I used to also depend on, this organization, and I used to think the United Nations was amazing. And then I started realizing, oh dear, right, what a rude awakening I had. So absolutely, yes, we need to, they like to use the word sustainable. We need to become self-sustainable. And we need to build our communities, and building a community doesn't necessarily mean coming away from the system. In other words, your own electricity, your own water, your own food, making sure that you eventually somehow get your own shelter, etc., etc. Odez does fantastic pieces on that in actuality. But it's very important to also understand that you do need a community. You need to know that you have someone or people that you can psychologically and emotionally also depend on. It's vital because we are human beings and we do crave human interaction. You cannot go through and go down this journey and down this path not having a support structure. So many people feel during this whole process that they are alone and that they don't know where to turn to. They don't know who to speak to. How can I do this on my own? It's just too much information. I can't fathom the idea of all of this being real. How is it even possible? It's okay. It's okay to feel that way, but it's important to speak to like-minded people. It's important to cross-question everything. Don't settle for any of the information, but go and get the information so that you can make an informed decision. It's very, very important to do that. So sadly, we have extensively looked into the ICC, and unfortunately, they can go and investigate Russia. I can tell you now that Mr. Putin is not going to just sit back and go, sure, I'll just take whatever is coming my way. I'm sure he's got a backup plan. This man has not been in the position that he's in because he's just fallen into that position, while in actuality he was just placed into that position by the previous president of Russia, because that was a strategic move that the United States was actually a part of right in the beginning. But boy, did they make a bad decision that time.
That's the way they do that. They create an enemy, they end up fighting. They did the same with the Taliban. They funded the Taliban and now they're fighting them. Like the Catholic Church created Islam and then they went on the Crusades to destroy them. This is what they do, and they don't care. Like, they will create the monster that they will eventually have to destroy.
But this boils down again to humanity, because humanity is unpredictable. People are unpredictable. You don't know how people are actually going to evolve. And I think that is beautiful. I think that is absolutely beautiful, because that shows me that we cannot be programmed. We are not AI.
No.
And because we are not AI, you do not have to settle. You don't have to settle for a 9-to-5. You don't have to settle to be told what to do. You don't have to be settled to live in a life that is dominated by fear and mainstream media. You are able to break out of your mold because you are not AI. I might not agree wholeheartedly with Putin and what he is doing or the type of person that he is, and is going to be. But in actuality, I learned so much from him because he's not AI and he swims against the stream.
Yes, what is the story with Putin though? Before we sort of close this off, I personally have been backwarding and forwarding, because ultimately my belief has been anyone in substantial amount of power over a reasonably powerful country with nuclear capacities has to be controlled. My belief always was that Putin at a certain level was controlled, but my movement is that he's seen, much like Gaddafi, much like Saddam Hussein, he's seen the machinations of the West and how they manipulate things, and that they are in fact now sort of trying to enclose him on his own borders with military capacities. And I do have to say, look, protect your land, protect your people, do what you got to do. I don't endorse war. I don't endorse any murder in the name of. But I kind of really have to go, they've kind of put him in an impossible position. They have manipulated him into this place. Why? Do they want the war? Is it because war is profitable? There's lots of money. It's one of the most profitable industries in the world, next to, ironically enough, the pharmaceutical industry, the oil industry, also all very destructive, right? So yeah, it's interesting to see what Putin's going to do next. They've banned Russia Today here in Portugal, so we can't get an alternative view other than what we pull off the internet.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing the speed with which, let's talk about this quickly, the sanctions, right? The speed with which people have done this. H&M have stopped selling. H&M, the retail store, stopped selling in Russia. All the major payment platforms, Stripe and all of that, have pulled their service from Russia. Webcam models can't get their money out of Stripe and these like PayPal type platforms. You know, there's a lot of them in Russia. You know, they can't pay their rent, can't feed their children, all this kind of thing. The sanctions, the speed at which the sanctions have been issued blew me, right? Like, just everybody jump on the bandwagon and punish these people. You don't really know what's going on, but let's punish them anyway. And you know what? We're going to cut off our own arm while we're doing it, because let me tell you, the amount of sales that H&M does in Russia is substantial. Let's just take a few million loss because, you know, we want to be on the right side of the political agenda. You know, it's ridiculous. That's what a number of companies, that's just everybody bloody pull away. We don't really know what's going on, but, you know, by God, we don't want to piss off the powers that be.
Exactly.
Play along nicely.
Exactly.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, really. And I would say to anybody out there, boycott any company that's boycotting Russia. You know, you know, if they're going to play the political game, right? They want to get involved with the stupid machinations of war. They deserve nothing less.
No, there's really, really, really so much more to it. I strongly suggest, Mel, I don't know if you've seen it, I strongly suggest that you go and watch the Putin interviews. There's 4 episodes, absolutely phenomenal. I really enjoyed it. And what I actually did was I didn't just go and, you know, take everything he said at face value. I made extensive notes on what he was talking about, and then I went and looked into what he was saying to see if there was actually a timeline and if he was actually just, you know, spewing hogwash. And in actuality, a lot of it, well, everything that I went to go and look at, I could actually find legitimate links to, and he wasn't spewing hogwash. So, guys, there's a lot more to it. You can go and have a look as well, just very, very briefly, because we do need to end it off. A naval ship, I think it's called the Sam Cook, that was heading straight towards Crimea at one stage, which was, you know, Sam Cook is in actuality a military naval ship, which you only send out if you want to attack, and it just entered their waters without any, you know, warning or any communication or anything like that. So it was almost like, you know, when you're on the playground and you've got this little child that just runs up to you and just like pulls your hair and then like runs away and stands at a distance and then waits for you to retaliate. So there's really been a lot of like tugging the bear, literally, well, poking the bear, should I rather say. So there's a lot of context, guys. There's so much context. Again, Syria is involved, Israel is involved, Crimea, Georgia is involved. Previous presidents are involved. This has been coming for many, many, many years. It's not something that's just happened overnight. But again, go and get your own information, make informed decisions, but please stay away from mainstream media. It is poison, just as bad as certain vials that are going around across the world. Anyway, Mel, I thank you so much. You are absolutely amazing. It's always a pleasure having you. Thank you very, very much. Anything in closing?
Oh, thank you, Natasha. So great that you facilitate the space. I'm really privileged to be working with someone who's got so much intelligence, and you do the research. I love it. And it's, you know, a really apt sparring partner for someone like myself who's had all this experience, and to be able to come on and discuss this with you and look at this objectively. I feel very privileged. So thank you for holding the space, and always grateful to be part of your Truth Be Told project. So thank you for having me.
No problem. Thank you so much. And to everyone out there, thank you guys so much for your continuous support. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And remember, every avenue is a possibility. There's always, always hope. And don't take everything at face value. It's really not always what it seems. Thanks so much, guys.